the Abscondo podcast. What I've been talking about on this podcast is awakening, spiritual awakening, consciousness, salvation. And I use my way of describing this or teaching this. There are infinite ways to write about or talk about or understand this idea. But when a person hears about it, when they hear about becoming spiritual or escaping the ego, committing to love, whatever it is, these are fundamental, scary changes. But what are we afraid of? Let's think about this a little bit deeper. What happens is that we spend our lives defining who we are with these stories in our minds. And it's not our fault. We're taught this from parents, from school, from society, through all the punishments and rewards. We're taught that to get love, to be respected, to be admired, to be liked, to be popular, to be worth anything, we have to, what? We have to create a story, craft an image. We have to become something. We have to know who we are. We have to know what we believe in. We have to know what we think about the world. And so when you come along and say, well, try this thing called spirituality or try this religion or whatever it may be, change fundamentally who you are, naturally, if you've been spending your life trying to create your identity, trying to build an identity, define yourself, craft an image, you're going to resist the idea of fundamentally letting go of that process. Because salvation does require that we let go of thoughts. We're constantly juggling thoughts about our life story, who we are, where we fit, where we're going, what's important to us, what we think about the world. We're holding on to all these thoughts and just juggling them. And they change constantly. One day we think that everything is fine, we're safe and secure, we have the life we've always dreamed of. The next day, we're not so sure. We start having thoughts that are a little bit surprising to ourselves. We might have, someone who we lean upon, a partner, change or start to attack or have a bad mood, start to accuse us of something. I mean, there's endless ways that this is unstable. And yet you come along and you say, well, let go of all that, become still, focus on the present moment, stop all the thoughts, let go of the thoughts. Let go of the idea of past and future. Let go of the ego. And what happens is that this mind that's been conditioned to only care about all that stuff, or mainly care about all that stuff, is fearful. We think that by letting go of these things that define our identity, we're going to lose our identity. We're not going to matter. We're not going to know who we are. We're going to lose everything. And let's be real, things do change. And I can tell you all about that. Things do change when you let go of this normal way of being. This idea that our identity is all these external things, the way we live, our situation, our circumstances, good or bad, our relationships, our children, our cities, our countries, our languages, all these traits, religion, beliefs, politics, all these things are what make up what we call the identity, which is really a false identity. And it's false because, why? Because you have to cling onto it and hold on to it so hard to try to make it real, but it's going to end. It always erodes. It's always unstable. And this practice of trying to do what's impossible, which is to create, this lasting, enduring identity, to get to this place in life. I mean, even the most powerful people in the world have conquered countries and put statues up. And now we look at those statues, hundreds of years later and have no idea who that person was or what they stood for. And it wasn't really very interesting to begin with. And that's kind of a metaphor for what we're doing. The ego isn't very interesting. The ego And people either love or hate, mostly hate when I use the word ego because, oh, don't go talking about ego. I don't know why that is, but, well, I do know because the ego itself is the one thinking that, and the ego feels threatened. But the ego thinks that, what? It thinks that everything, it looks for differences always. I can't be friends with you because I don't believe the same things you do. You're wrong, I'm right. And all it cares about is this idea. I'm separating this person away from me. That's a toxic person over here. What can I get from that person? What can I get in general? What can I become? Can I get rich? Can I become more beautiful? These are all the concerns of the ego. And a lot of people talk about spirituality, but they're really talking about just their own ego. But the thing is, the ego isn't interesting. It thinks that it's trying to make you interesting. This practice of defining your identity, the whole point is that we believe that we're interesting. We're different from other people. I like music. I know how to play guitar. I can write songs. I'm a writer. I'm in pretty good shape. Well, the thing is, maybe there's some differences on the surface, but it's not really interesting. But what I see when I look at ego from the perspective of spirit, from someone who can see beyond my ego, who can look just from presence and just the conscious awareness beneath everything or surrounding everything, when I look at it, I look at egos and they all do the same thing. It's completely predictable. There's nothing interesting. There's no true identity because you're doing what every other ego is doing. The behavior, the workings of the ego is exactly the same. It's totally conformist. You're trying to be right, trying to be better, defining separation, resisting everything, saying no, trying to figure out good and bad, try to manipulate things so does that sound familiar? That's what ego does. Trying to punish and reward people so they do what you want them to do. All the while, of course, you have no idea what's good or bad because reality is far too complex to know. You don't know what's good and bad. Sometimes you might lose a job and think it's the worst thing that ever happened, and then 2 months later you start your own business and you're independent and you're wealthier than ever and happier than ever and have more time. So we don't know what's good or bad. We're always judging this and trying to hold on to some identity of a job that we might have or a house that maybe we can't afford anymore that we have to let go of. So letting go, it's not losing your identity because you're letting go of things that are false anyway. You're clinging and holding on to things that, if they go away, that means they weren't real to begin with. And this provides an opportunity for what is real about you to emerge from under all this clutter, all these silly thoughts, all these struggles and all the ego is boring. Nothing happens. It's all in the head. People are living in their heads. Nobody's actually enjoying things. We're not effortlessly flowing into each other's homes and lives and sharing things together and laughing and talking freely and exploring and learning and growing and experiencing. There's not enough love flowing around, right? Because the ego is resisting it all the time. It's always finding ways, reasons why we can't connect, reasons why it doesn't work, reasons why it's not appropriate, reasons why it's not normal. What do people think? What are they going to think? What if I told someone this 2 years from now? What are they going to think? I mean, this is what the ego does, and it becomes a very boring, habitual thing that does its thing. It's like a machine. It just doesn't allow you freedom to do anything different. So something new comes along, or some new passion comes from within you, and what do? You resist it. You try to forget about it. You try not to pursue what you actually want. You sacrifice. I'm just seriously only scratching the surface of all the problems with this state of normal, this egoic state. And people will defend the ego. I can't tell you how many people who I respect and who maybe read my blog or follow me on Instagram, and even the ones who get it It's like, yeah, but you're all that stuff you say about ego, it's natural to have an ego. Okay. Well, first of all, the ego, natural. I guess it's natural, whatever that means. But it arose something like 7,000 years ago. What before that, the humans did not really have this, ego domination. The native tribes and the Native Americans, and before civilization arose, that's people did not have an ego. They lived in the way that that you would without an ego. Now we're not talking about going back to that. We're talking about evolving beyond this disastrous situation where we're living with no wisdom. We're not feeling good. We're not achieving anything worthwhile. We're destroying the planet just for our own false needs, for this silly game. We're sacrificing everything that matters, life itself, the planet. We're putting love off. We're creating all kinds of mental illnesses and all these problems because of this way of life. So we're talking about evolving. Now, the ego is going to continue to have its silly thoughts. I know that, for me, I can say that I've awakened. I've always been going toward this path, but I have awakened maybe 3 or 4 years ago. There's no exact date. It's a daily thing. I have to connect with meditation. I have to write something and read something. I have to live it every day. But even on those days when I do it every day, but regardless, those thoughts in the mind continue. The difference is that when you've detached from ego, you no longer identify that that's who I am, those thoughts. What happens is that those thoughts, you can easily shut it up. You can stop a stream of thought or a line of thinking so you don't follow thoughts. You learn that through meditation. I use guided meditation. It's called Meditation Oasis for free. There's others that are, I'm sure, just as good or better, but I love this one. And it teaches you how to let go of thoughts. Now, don't keep following the train of thought. What if this customer leaves, and then I lose my money, and then I lose my home, and then I get thrown out of, and you have these silly, this stream of thought that you can't stop. But when you awaken, you can let that go, even though you might start down that path. Other times, you might have a thought about someone and say, okay, that was my ego. I'm not going to follow that. I'm not going to take it seriously. It's just my mind doing what it does. So I don't react to it. It's not that I force myself not to. I just know, with a different level of knowing that comes from consciousness, that this is just a silly thought. It will change in 2 hours. It doesn't mean anything. So what happens when you know that, what happens is those thoughts from the mind don't necessarily feed emotions into the body. So stress, and this is a big one, stress comes from believing your own thoughts. You lie awake at night, heart racing, and this is how you become ill. This is where disease comes. This is where problems arise in the body because it's not a natural state. Maybe it's natural to have an ego. I'm not going to argue, but at the same time, that's not the way the body's meant to function. It's supposed to function that way when we're actually in danger. When nature presents us with a challenge, when our lives are in danger, that's what's supposed to happen. Not when we have a thought about tomorrow's presentation, or whatever it may be, right? So we're going to evolve eventually, or we're going to die. We're going to destroy the environment to the point where we can't sustain life on Earth, or we're going to evolve beyond this ego-identified, the mind-identified, the thought-identified way of living. And there's nothing to be afraid of, because as you peel back this nonsense, this boring, monotonous nonsense that is the same in everyone, you find your identity. You don't lose it. You lose the false identity, and you find the true identity. The true identity, and I'm not trying to say that I can define such a thing, but I can point to perhaps some understanding of it with words. The true identity has to do with that oneness that connects all humans, all life. We all want to feel good. We all want to experience joy and happiness and peace and love. We all want to feel safe. And this is the dimension that we can connect on, and we can know about each other. We don't have to care about the differences, because if we can mute the mind and make this stuff real, to care about the love, to be guided by loving wisdom, a loving thought system, a loving way of acting toward not just the one person or just a few kids of our own, but to everyone we possibly can find a way to extend it to. Now, we're not in the ego anymore. And now we can focus our thinking on things like our work, like doing focused, great work now when it's needed in the present moment, responding to whatever is happening. We can use the mind to create. There's a lot of, in spirituality, a lot of people talk about no thought, and that's wonderful. That's no thought is when you're experiencing beauty, when you're experiencing joy, when you're healing. It's a wonderful way of it's a blissful way of experiencing the world, but the mind is designed to think, and there are going to, before long, you are going to have thoughts. What I've found, which may be a little bit off typical conventional wisdom, but I've sort of discovered this week, is that when you can focus your thinking in the present moment, we're talking about present moment awareness, letting go of these thoughts, these constructs, but to focus on what's happening now. So here's my challenge now. Here's what I'm creating now. Here's what I'm doing now. And now the thoughts are directed toward the reality, and the reality is always in the present moment, right? Nothing's ever existed in the past or the future. It's always existed in the eternal, ongoing now. Now, when you focus not just your conscious awareness to what's around you, but also your thoughts to what's happening now, you become your best. You shine. And your identity manifests in a way that people can perceive it, especially other people who are able to move beyond their own ego. I mean, if someone's in their ego, they're not going to perceive you anyway. They're just going to find some differences and reject you anyway, right? But if you can truly, peel back the layers and disidentify with the mind's thoughts as your identity, what ends up happening is whatever's left about you, your true personality, shines through, and you become better at everything you do. Everything's inspired. You bring a lot of happiness and love to the world. At least you try. Well, I guess I'll leave it at that. This is a longer podcast, covered a lot of topics randomly. I hope some of it made sense to you, and I'd love some feedback. If you want to visit my blog at abscondo.com or write me at mark.manny@abscondo.com. I would love to hear from you. Or follow me on Instagram, Abscondo, as well. I will leave it with one of my Abscondo songs. Enjoy, and look forward to a new podcast, hopefully weekly. Thanks a lot.
Come with me into my room. There's one thing on my mind today since noon. What we knew yesterday changed today, and that's why I smile at you. Dark eyes on me, tear me in two. And there's one thing that we got right, we both knew what to do and what to say. There's no way to fly like I do with you. Buyer beware, my heart is taken. Buyer beware, and your hand is shaking. Beware, where will this go tomorrow? Hold on to me and let yourself go, with no need to cry. We watch the tears flow. What we knew yesterday changed today. The world wants you to go. Buyer beware, my heart is taken. Buyer beware, and your hand is shaking. Beware, where will this go tomorrow? And every time I hear you speak, I feel peace inside of me. I've never ever known. I'm aware but when these dreams are fast asleep, well, you still have my soul to keep. And wherever you go, I'll be there. And wherever you